The blue lights pull the car in and you feel your stomach drop, even though you're not the one driving. You're in the passenger seat. You haven't touched the wheel. You haven't done a thing. The officer comes to the driver's window first, does the usual, and then, and this is the moment, he dips his head, looks past the driver, straight at you, and says, easy and friendly, "And what's your name, mate? Where are you all coming from tonight?" And every instinct you have says, answer him. You've done nothing wrong. The driver's cooperating. It would be strange and rude not to. So you tell him your name. You tell him where you've been. And in those few polite seconds, you have just handed a police officer something he had no power to make you give, and that most passengers never realize they can simply keep. Because here is the thing almost nobody knows until it's too late. In a traffic stop, in England and Wales, the passenger and the driver are not in the same legal position at all, not even close. And the entire trick, and it is a trick, whether the officer means it as one or not, depends on you not knowing the difference. So today I'm going to show you exactly what a passenger has to do in a stop, which is almost nothing, what the driver has to do, which is quite a lot, and the one calm sentence that ends the questions the moment they start pointing at you. And stay with me right to the end, because there are a handful of specific situations where a passenger genuinely does have to give their details, and if you don't know which ones they are, you can get this exactly backwards and land yourself in real trouble. I'll make sure you know every one of them. I'm Oliver Bennett, a criminal defence solicitor here in England and Wales, and for 15 years I have watched people who were never even accused of anything talk themselves into a police file from the passenger seat, cheerfully, helpfully, answering questions they never had to answer. Let me make sure that's never you. So let me give you the whole answer up front, before I explain a word of it, because it's simpler than you think. The driver, behind the wheel, has real legal duties. Under the Road Traffic Act, the driver must give their name and address and produce their documents. That's the driver. You, the passenger, are not the driver, and in an ordinary stop, you are under no obligation to give the police your name, no obligation to give your address, no obligation to say where you've been or who you are, and no obligation even to carry ID, because in this country there's no law that says you must. Almost none of what applies to the driver applies to you. Which means you can hold the answer to the whole video in one sentence, and I'm going to give it to you right now, so you've got it even if you have to click away in 10 seconds. When the officer turns from the driver and starts asking who you are, you say, calmly and pleasantly, "I'm just a passenger officer. Am I being detained or am I free to go?" That's the sentence. Screenshot it. Now stay with me, because knowing the sentence is not the same as knowing when it works and when it doesn't. And there are exactly 5 situations where a passenger does have to give their details. And if you use this line in one of those, you can turn yourself from someone with nothing to worry about into the one person committing an offence. I'll walk you through all 5 so you never get it backwards. First, let me show you why that little sentence is so powerful and why they're hoping you never use it. So sit with how big that gap is. The driver has a whole list of legal duties. The passenger, in a normal stop, has essentially none. And yet, watch any real stop, the officer very often works the passenger seat exactly the same way he works the driver's. Same tone, same expectation, same, "and you are?" And that is the trick, in its entirety. It isn't a threat, it's an assumption, delivered with enough easy authority that you assume it too. He asks as if you're required to answer, and your good manners fill in the rest. And I want you to understand why it matters, why this isn't just a point of principle, because a name and a "where have you been" can do real work later. When you, the passenger, volunteer your identity, you have now put yourself by name in that car at that time on that road. You've tied yourself to that driver and that vehicle in a way you didn't have to. If there is anything at all going on with that car, anything the officer is quietly wondering about, you have just made yourself part of the picture with your own mouth, before you even knew there was a picture. A passenger who says nothing of substance is simply a person who was in a car. A passenger who's handed over a name and a movement is a line in a notebook. You never have to become that line. And it's worth understanding why an officer works the passenger seat at all, because once you see it, the friendliness stops feeling quite so casual. Sometimes it's completely innocent. He's making conversation, filling the time while the checks run. But sometimes he's fishing. He's trying to work out who everyone in that car actually is, whether the person in the passenger seat is someone of interest, whether the story you tell about where you've been matches the story the driver just told, whether anyone's name brings something back on the system. A passenger who chats freely is, to a curious officer, an open filing cabinet. And none of it, not one word of it, were you ever required to provide. Let me make that concrete because it sounds abstract until it's you. Imagine a man getting a lift home from a colleague after a late shift. He's done nothing, he's just tired and wants his bed. The car gets stopped for a brake light. The officer, perfectly pleasant, leans in. "And you are? Where have you two been?" And the man, being normal and polite, says his name and says they've come from work. Harmless. True. Except now, weeks later, if that car or that driver ever comes up in something he knew nothing about, there's a note with his name in it, placing him in that vehicle, that night, a thread he handed over for the price of being polite about a brake light. He wasn't a suspect. He made himself a footnote, and he never had to say a word. So look again at that sentence I gave you at the start. I'm just a passenger, officer. Am I being detained, or am I free to go? Now that you can see the trap, it quietly diffuses. In one calm breath, it states the single fact that changes everything, that you're the passenger and not the driver, and it puts the ball straight back in his court by making him tell you which of two worlds you're in. Either he's detaining you, in which case he has to have a lawful reason and tell you what it is, or he isn't, and if he isn't, you don't have to answer a single question, and you're free to sit quietly or to go. Say it warmly, no attitude, no lecture. That gentleness is the whole point. You're not being difficult, you're just declining, politely, to do a job that was never yours to do. Now I can hear the worry, because every decent person has it. But Oliver, if I won't even give my name, won't that make me look guilty? Won't it just make everything worse? And I understand it completely. But declining to answer questions you are not obliged to answer is not evidence of anything. It is not suspicious in law. The officer knows the passenger has no duty here. What he is hoping is that your fear of seeming difficult will make you do the work for him. It won't, once you know the ground you're standing on. You can be the most polite person in that car, "Evening, officer, hope you're well," and still gently give no account of yourself. Courtesy and silence are not opposites. Together, from the passenger seat, they are your whole position. And understand why this trick works on good people specifically. Because it's not stupidity, it's three very human things all firing at once. The first is the assumption of authority. An officer asked you a direct question in an official voice, and every instinct you were raised with says you answer a figure of authority who asks. The second is the herd. The driver is cooperating, maybe there's another passenger cooperating, and being the one person who quietly declines feels like standing out, being awkward, being the difficult one. And the third is the innocence reflex. I've done nothing wrong, so talking can only clear things up. That last one is the cruelest, because it's the honest people it works on hardest. The more law-abiding you are, the more you want to prove it, and the only tool your brain reaches for is your own mouth. But your innocence isn't something you perform for an officer through the passenger window. It's simply a fact. You don't owe him a performance of it. There's also a quieter version of this aimed at the youngest passengers. Teenagers, young people getting a lift, get asked their names and where they're going as though it's simply required, and they, of all people, have no idea it isn't. If you've got kids who are out and about in other people's cars, this is one of the most useful things you can teach them. Be polite, be calm, and if you're just a passenger, you can say, "I'd rather not answer. Am I free to go?" without being in a shred of trouble for it. Now, the part I told you to wait for, and you must not skip this, because this is where a little knowledge becomes dangerous. It is not true that a passenger never has to give their details. There are specific situations where you do, and if you dig your heels in during one of those, thinking you're clever, you can turn yourself from a passenger with nothing to worry about into a person committing a fresh offence. So let me draw the lines exactly. The first, if the police reasonably suspect that you have committed an offence, the passenger has no duty rule is about an ordinary stop where the interest is the vehicle and the driver. The moment the officer has grounds to suspect you personally of something, the picture changes and different powers switch on. The second, a seatbelt offence. If you're an adult and you weren't wearing your seatbelt, that is your offence, as the passenger, not the driver's, and the police can require your details for it. The third, Antisocial behaviour. Under Section 50 of the Police Reform Act, if an officer reasonably believes you've been acting or are acting in an antisocial manner, they can require your name and address, and refusing then is itself an offence. The fourth, if you're being reported for an offence. And the fifth, if you're detained for a search on reasonable grounds or arrested, then you're in an entirely different situation with its own rules. Outside of those, in a plain stop, the passenger's answer is the calm sentence I gave you. Inside of those, the game has changed, and the smart move is to give the details you're genuinely required to give and save everything else for later, ideally with a solicitor. And that leads to the single most important warning in this whole video, so hear it clearly. Whatever you do, do not give a false name. This is the mistake that turns a nothing into a something. If you are in one of those situations where you are required to give your details and you make up a name, that is an offence in itself, and lying to an officer can be obstruction. Here's the clean way to hold both ideas at once. Where you are not required to answer, you stay silent. Silence is completely lawful. Where you are required to answer, you tell the truth. What you never, ever do is lie. Silence is a right. A false name is a crime. Keep those two apart and you cannot go wrong. There's one more move they'll sometimes try, and you should be ready for it: the threat. Give me your name or I'll arrest you. It sounds terrifying from the passenger seat, and it's designed to. But an officer can't lawfully arrest you simply for declining to answer a question you had no duty to answer. There has to be a real, lawful reason for an arrest. So if that threat comes, you don't argue and you don't panic. You ask, calmly, the one question that calls it. What's the offence you're arresting me for, officer? If there's a real answer, you'll hear it, and you deal with that. If there isn't, and very often there isn't, you've just, politely, revealed the bluff, on the record, without saying a word about yourself. Two more quick situations because they come up and you should be ready. They may ask you to step out of the car. In an ordinary stop, you can be asked to step out, and it's usually easiest to do it calmly. But stepping out of the car is not the same as agreeing to answer questions or agreeing to be searched. You can be standing on the pavement, perfectly cooperative about where your body is, and still be declining politely to give an account of yourself. And a search. An officer can only search you, the passenger, if they have reasonable grounds to suspect they'll find something specific: drugs, a weapon, stolen goods, under Section 1 of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, and they have to tell you the grounds and give you certain information first. So if it comes to that, the calm question is simply, what are your grounds for the search, officer? You don't physically resist a search, you never do that. You just make him state the legal basis out loud. And here's the key point people miss. A search of your person or your bag is not permission to search your words. While it happens, you still don't have to answer questions about who you are or where you've been. And if you're watching this thinking, but I've already done it, I've been the passenger who reeled off my name and where we'd been, don't beat yourself up. Until this minute, nobody had told you there was any other option, and being cooperative is not a crime. The point of this was never guilt about last time. It's the calm sentence in your mouth for next time. One polite overshare from a passenger seat is very rarely the end of the world. It's just a lesson in knowing, from now on, which seat you're sitting in. Let me make it real, the way these things actually play out. Picture two friends in the same car, pulled over on the same night, both completely innocent. The first, a lovely, obliging man, gets asked his name and where they've been and answers all of it, because that's the polite thing to do. And now his name sits in a notebook, tied to that car, that driver, that road, that hour, for reasons he'll never know and can't undo. The second friend, no ruder, no less cooperative in manner, simply says, "I'm just a passenger, am I free to go?" And then sits quietly and pleasantly while the stop runs its course. Both were innocent. Only one of them handed the night a version of himself he didn't have to. Nothing bad may ever come of it for the first man, but if anything ever does, he built the first line of it himself. The second man gave the night nothing to work with. That is the entire difference, and it cost you not 1 ounce of politeness. And think about how it reads if either of those nights ever turns into paperwork. The first man's own words are sitting in a statement, his name, his movements, in his own voice, handed over freely, and there's nothing anyone can do to take them back. The second man's night is just an officer's note that a car was stopped and a passenger sat quietly, which is exactly what an innocent passenger looks like. One of them wrote himself into the story, the other simply didn't pick up the pen. There's one more honest reason officers probe the passenger, and it's worth knowing because it shows you the game: the seat swap. If a car's been driven by someone who's disqualified or uninsured, a favourite move is for the driver and a passenger to switch seats before the police reach the window, so the officer, quite reasonably, wants to work out who was actually driving. Now, if that's genuinely nothing to do with you, you still don't answer your way into it, but understand that this is often what the sudden interest in the passenger is really about. It's another reason your calm, factual sentence, "I'm just a passenger, am I free to go?" is the right one. It neither confesses nor invents. It simply declines to fill in a story you're not required to tell. Before I give you the last piece, one honest word, because this is exactly what people write to me about after it's happened. Did I have to give my name? Was I allowed to just sit there? Can they really make a passenger talk? I finally put all of it in one place, in plain English, in the UK Know Your Rights Handbook. The driver's duties and the passengers, what you must give and what you never have to, on the road, at your door, and on your phone. It's the thing I wish every person had read before they ever sat in a car that got pulled over. It's linked below if you want it. No pressure at all. It's just everything I'd tell a friend, gathered together. So here's where you land it all. If you're ever the passenger in a stop and the questions start coming at you, remember the two facts that hold the whole thing up. The driver has duties, and you very likely don't. Give your courtesy freely, a smile, a good evening, no aggression at all. Give your account of yourself not at all, unless you're in one of those specific situations where the law genuinely requires it, in which case you tell the simple truth and nothing more. And never, ever invent a name. The calm sentence carries you through almost every version of this. I'm just a passenger, officer. Am I being detained, or am I free to go? Do this today. Put that sentence in your phone and send it to the person you're most often a passenger with, because the whole trick only works on good, helpful people who never knew the passenger seat had different rules. It stops working the moment they do. If this might protect someone you care about, give it a like so it reaches them, and subscribe. I break down one of these police encounters in plain English every single week, so the next time you're in that seat, you already know exactly what to say. I'll see you there.